Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today, uh, this is just such a incredibly sad case. It's one of those that the victim is just one of those perfect people, perfect children, and of course, it's people say, well, even imperfect people shouldn't be murdered. Of course, we don't want anybody murdered. But what strikes one about this case is just that the parents appear to have done everything right to raise a beautiful child who was well loved by everybody and was just an amazing young woman. And she gets killed in her own home in a horrible, brutal homicide. It's kind of like that, just like, how could this possibly be? It's happened back in 1994, and her name is Jenny Lynn. Um, and I'm going to go over the FBI profile of the case and the three suspects and who I think it is more likely to be than not. So, anyway, I want to welcome everybody who is here in the chat room. Hello, everyone. Kurtz has just come in. Dog's Discussion has just come in. Who else just came in? Leslie just came in, and the engineer. Oh, and Benny says he can he can see and hear me, which is good because Nicole is here too. Who else have I said hello to? All right, Lady Jane is now here. And if you'd like to be in the chat room, please please do be part of the chat room. No, here we go. Sorry. I just got back from New York about 2 hours ago. Spent 4 very busy days in New York City with my daughter and my granddaughter. So I'm like exhausted. So expect technical difficulties. Anyway, if you'd like to be in the chat room or support the channel or both, please do join Patreon in the link below. I have 8 live shows a month, 2 every week. I have the case show on the weekend and a hangout during the week and a nice community. And so the live shows are open only to patrons. So please join if you'd like to do that. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to send $5 either. You can just subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. All of my videos are public once the live show is done. So I want everybody to be able to learn. And I do try to pay attention to comments and comment back if I think it's, an interesting comment. And so please do that and check my playlist. All right, let's get to Jenny Lynn. It's one of those cases that really did terribly much make me sad. And these are parents who have never gotten justice because although there may be a suspect that is better suspect than others, there's never been any absolute proof to link to the crime. So therefore, time has passed and the case is still considered an unsolved case, which is, I don't know. I can't even imagine. So Linda says, technical difficulties are actually part of your charm. How kind of you. Sure. Somebody asked me, Taylor says, hopefully no issues with TSA. I didn't go to the airport this time, so TSA did not sexually assault me and give me a pat down in places that they shouldn't have touched. No, I took the train, which is fascinating to me because it's Amtrak, and we just parked at the Amtrak garage right there, rolled right onto the train. There's zero security, zero. So it's funny. I guess you're allowed to blow up a train, but not a plane. I don't get it, but it was great. The train rolls right into Penn Station from BWI, which is where we got on near the Baltimore airport, and just roll right into Penn Station. And then we just grabbed a cab and went over to our hotel, which was at Times Square, which is a W in case you go, because that was a fantastic hotel. Exceeded our expectations, which were pretty low, but it was a great hotel. And then from there, you could just enjoy the sights and not worry about a car. Do take the subway in New York. It was absolutely amazing. I don't know what everybody's talking bad about the subway. It was great. We went everywhere in the subway, including yesterday when we took the subway out to Coney Island and had a day at the beach. And my granddaughter went on the rides, and we saw this fantastic sideshow of 2 women who did sword swallowing and fire eating. It was incredible. We had a great time. So check it out. All right, to the show. Who was Jenny Lynn? So back in 1994, first of all, I'm going to tell you where I got some of the information from. I'm going to have 4 different places, which I will put in the description. And this is there's a book called Lust to Kill, which is about one of the suspects. It's available on Amazon, but only by paperback. And then this was the On the Case with Paula Zahn, which her parents were in, and so it's a really it's a very heartrending thing to watch, but very good. It shows gives a lot of information, although no conclusions. So I suggest those. But I'm also going to use 2 for the show just to give basic information from, as well as the other 2. One is called, I'll link it below and in the description. It's called uncovered.com, and it's about cold cases. I'm just going to read you this because there's no Wikipedia page on Jenny. She didn't get her own. So let's just tell you a little bit about Jenny. So back in 1994, the Palomares Hills housing development was a new neighborhood in Castro Valley, California. Many of the residents moved to this neighborhood for the safety and beauty of the Castro Valley Hills, including the Lynn family. And the houses were quite lovely. So these, generally speaking, the people who moved into them had a reasonable amount of money. Often two people were working. So a lot of times there was nobody home during the day, which may have an impact on this case because you had to pay for those houses. The Lins were first-generation immigrants from Taiwan who settled in the U.S. with the hope of giving their children a safe life with a hopeful future. And I thought she was an only daughter till recently when I found out she had a sister in college, but not much is said about her. So I guess they had 2 girls, as far as I can tell, and lived quite a charmed life, and a life where they were good parents. They worked hard. They were good, both professionals, and they raised 2 girls who were doing well. So no one could have imagined that their daughter Jenny's life would be cut short. Jenny was described by her friends and family as a popular middle school student who was talented in dance, piano, and viola. She excelled at viola in particular and was invited to join the Castro Valley Chamber Orchestra. She also excelled academically and received straight A's during her time attending Canyon Middle School. She is characterized as being vibrant and easygoing. And if you watch the Paula Zahn documentary, she seems just like the nicest girl. Smiling, happy. She was doing this whole video in Washington, D.C., and she was pretending like to be a reporter. And she was just very, very likable and seemed like a person who just loved life, really loved life, and loved her family, loved her friends. But 2 days after her 14th birthday, Jenny's father, John, dropped her off at school the morning of Friday, May 27th, 1994. This was the last time her family would see her before John made the heartbreaking discovery that same evening. So now, she lived in this area here. All right. So you can see the houses are quite lovely. And there's a huge housing development. But her house did back up to a grassy area, which could have something to do with how she was murdered. The person did enter through the back of the house, and they could move along this fence line and not be seen or hide in the bushes. If they were peeping Toms, they could certainly do something right here. And apparently the Lins did not have a lot of drapery, a lot of curtains. And I relate to that because I always hated curtains. So I hardly ever have curtains in a house. I'm just aware of what windows I shouldn't be in front of at certain times. But other than that, I just never cared. And my houses have not been on the road. So they've been off the road enough where if somebody sees me walking around the kitchen, I really don't care. If I'm sitting in a living room, I really don't care. But I'm back off the road enough where probably I don't have a lot of prying eyes unless there's a peeping Tom. So in this case, did they have one? And that's up for grabs. But this is the area she lived in. It was a lovely area. So Dad comes home, and let me tell you what happened after she left school. She made it through school, and then she returned home around 3:00, and she was on the phone with her friends. She was playing piano, doing actually a duet with her friend, and they were chatting. So everything was pretty normal. She was home alone because her parents did work and did not return till dinner time. And she was home alone. And the last time somebody talked to her was at 5:15 p.m. Her father arrives home at 6:45, and that's when he finds her dead in the upstairs bathroom. Um, so up in the bathroom, I'll show you a sort of vague bit of this. So this is the piano. They had obviously a grand piano. So they say these people were relatively well off because they worked very hard. So he had the upstairs bath. This is actually a master bedroom bathroom. So he didn't find her downstairs. He's looking for her. He's like, where is she? He looked outside. She wasn't outside with the dog, was in the dog run. And he gets up to his bedroom and goes into the bathroom and he finds this. So she was found in the bathroom. Now, I've seen naked or mostly naked, clothes cut off of her body. She was bound with duct tape, and this I think, plays a very big part of this. Her ankles were bound together with duct tape. Her knees were bound together with duct tape, and her hands behind her back with duct tape. And now, the hands is not that unusual. Sometimes the feet, just so they can't run away. The knees is very interesting to me, and I'll explain why I find that interesting. It said there was no apparent motive. Well, she's basically naked or mostly naked, so I'm going to say there's a motive right there, or sign of a struggle. Well, when people say a sign of a struggle, what they mean is somebody attacked her, and therefore you see chairs thrown and all that stuff. So the rest of the house was okay. So she was taken to the bathroom, and she would be taken to the bathroom one of two ways: with a knife or with a gun. And once somebody points a gun at you and says, move, you move. You go where they tell you to go. And once they put a knife to your neck, the same sort of thing happens. So just because there's a struggle doesn't mean you're like, oh, hi, I know you. Let's have a chit chat. Let's go to the bathroom and sit on sit on the tub and talk. No, she was herded into the bathroom by somebody with a weapon. And once she got in there, then they start with the easiest part, which is get on your knees, put your hands behind your back, and then they duct tape her. And unless you're, you could see movies where as a person puts the knife aside or the gun aside to do the duct taping, and then the person jumps up and the whole ninja scene happens, and or MMA, and they fight the person off. But you're talking about a 14-year-old girl. She's probably scared out of her mind at this point. She thinks she's going to be shot in the head or her throat cut, and she's going to put her hands behind it. And it doesn't take long to just start to tape real quick. Once you've done that, the rest is pretty easy. Okay? I would tape the feet up next if I were that guy, and then I flip her over and tape up her knees. And you have to ask why, and I'll get to that. So then she was killed. There was supposedly no sign of a sexual assault. I'll get to that later too. She was stabbed in the abdomen. And her throat was cut in a very brutal, just really vicious way. And it means it came with a knife, and it wasn't a knife from the house. So he brought the knife with him. Whether he also came with a gun, I don't know, but definitely with a knife, and definitely brought the duct tape too, because that wasn't from the house either. So this person came with a kit essentially, and this is some of the evidence. This is a duct tape. We used a lot of duct tape, by the way. And why so much duct tape? And the police said the way he used the duct tape was like the duct tape was part of what he was enjoying. So it wasn't just for the purposes of preventing her from moving. It was a major part of the actual crime. Some people would say signature. I'm not fond of that word, but that he did it because he wanted to do it, not just because he had to do it for. So we have MO and signature. Let me explain that. MO is modus operandi, or method of operation. In other words, I got to control you, throwing some duct tape around you. That's MO. Signature basically indicates that this is part of his enjoyment that's special to him for whatever reasons. And so that's sort of, the police sort of thought that the tape was excessive, and that was part of the enjoyment of what he was doing. I would call that, to me, looks like bondage, a sexual fantasy of bondage, which would make this attack a sexual attack. Although, as I've always pointed out many times, when we're talking about certain attacks, it's about power and control, and a sexual assault is just one method of power and control, and to way to humiliate a victim, to way to feel strong, And of course, if you add a little sex in there for males, I mean, they enjoy that part of it as well. That's very exciting and very satisfying. So it all goes together. So try not to over chop things up. It's really in the mind of the offender. He doesn't go through all that psychology stuff. He's like, I like doing this. Okay, so somebody came in and did that to her. How did they get in? All right, the way they found the guy got in was through the back. He broke a window and then got in through there. And then also, they don't know exactly when this happened, before she got home or after she got home. But they believe he was in the house for a long period of time, like watching her from like behind the curtains, or just to see what she was doing, like a peeping Tom, but on the inside of the house. And then after this happened, he let himself out the sliding glass doors, and he left on the back step on the back deck. And here they were actually able to get some prints from his shoes. And then he went down that area that I was talking about, disappeared apparently this direction. Somebody did see a guy, they thought at that later that time, just before the father got home, or somewhere around that time, a guy with like a hoodie or a hat or something, carrying a bag. If you go back to this is from the show. So like a bag with him that had the things in it he wanted to use, and then he ran off with that. No DNA at the scene, which is very unfortunate. So they had no clue who it was or why somebody would do this horrific thing to her. She didn't have a boyfriend. She didn't have ex-boyfriends. She was just a nice straight A student who seems like a good kid all the way around. Somebody came in and killed her. So the question came to, in this very safe neighborhood in the middle. This is during daylight hours too. We're not talking about in the middle of the night. So that's what's so unusual about the case. It was daylight hours. Just to point out again, this is the neighborhood. This is the front of it. And there was this weird dude. This was a strange story that 15 days earlier, on May 12th, a man approached the father at a train station, at the Bay Area Rapid Transit Station, and said that he had his daughter. And he ignored the man, but checked on his two daughters anyway, and they were fine. This happened 2 weeks before. This is a sketch that they had of this guy. And the police have never come up with who it is. They have no idea if there's any connection to this crime at all, but it was such a strange thing. And this guy's saying he kidnapped a girl. And I mean, there never was any reason to believe it was connected, but that's a pretty unusual thing to happen 2 weeks before a crime, to have somebody say that to you. But then again, there's a lot of nutbirds out there, so maybe he was just one of them, and it was coincidental. He was never identified, and there was no ransom attempt. Obviously, she never left the house. She was dead in the house. The parents, did they check on the father? Yes, they did. They checked on the father, make sure he didn't do something to his daughter, and he was alibied out and seemed like wonderful parents. So he had nothing to do with it. So now we're going to get to the profile that the the FBI did, and the three known possible persons of interest. I'll check on some of your comments before I continue. All right. What was the father's business? I forgot. No, it doesn't seem to be anything that he was involved with that would be any particular reason why anybody was trying to hurt the family. Wait a minute. Nicole's correct. Bart is full of weirdos. I lived in San Francisco for years. And that could well be. If anybody remembers what the father did, do let me know. It's somewhere in all the notes, but it didn't really have any bearing on the crime, other than both he and his wife were professionally employed and a fine family. Shall I just say that? So let's see. Now this is an interesting point, Clarissa. Probably watching the house for days. One of the issues is how did the killer of Jenny know that she would be home alone for that period of hours? And one of our suspects, because reason he's such a strong suspect to many people, is because he was a neighbor and would know that she was home alone. And I'll talk about him in a second. All the taping would have prolonged poor Jennifer's suffering. Well, the terror of being duct taped or tied up in any way, shape, or form, you absolutely have no way to fight back. You're at that point completely vulnerable to whatever they're going to do to you, which is just as horrific as you can get. Wait a minute. Pat uses a Dumbo's voice when speaking like the perpetrator, but maybe he was just a stone cold psychopath who wasn't so dumb. No, what I mean is about I just like doing it. Yeah, I was just in New York, so it's a terrible New York City accent. But psychopaths, especially if they're sexual psychopaths or serial killers, the Hollywood and the FBI profiles who want to write exciting books often exaggerate the personality of the serial killer to the fact where he's extraordinarily clever and is thinking all these amazing things, when most of the time they're pretty run-of-the-mill people, just like the rest of us. They're not so thoughtful, shall we say, about what they do. They just like what they like. It's like a guy looks at some porn magazines and decides to watches some porn on the internet, and he says, "Hey, this looks like fun." This guy could either be a PhD, or he could be a guy who has a I'd say a blue collar job. But first of all, neither one of them makes you smarter. I want to point that out, because the blue collar people will get mad at me, and they're correct about that. IQ has nothing to do with your job. So you can be brilliant and have any kind of job, but you also inside have basic human behaviors and basic human needs. And the need for power and control is a human need for all people, regardless of their level of status, their level of professions, or whatever you want to put it at. We all have that need. And sometimes when you're in certain societies where you've had an important part of that society, let's say you're a shoemaker, let's say you're a pot maker, and I mean not weed, but making an actual pot, and you've lived in the society for a long time in that culture, and people have grown up knowing maybe your whole family's been pot makers, and therefore you have a feeling of security and power and control with what you do that gives importance to the community. And sometimes in more modern times, a lot of people feel much more alienated no matter what they do. They feel like people don't pay any attention to me. People don't. And especially if you're watching so much crap on TV where somebody's getting massive attention, like the Kardashians. And it's like, well, they're like everywhere and they're so important. And me, I'm just little old me. And that has an effect on a lot of people. And if you're already a psychopath, you really feel that way. So You want that thrill of power and control, and you're not going through a whole psychological thing in your head. This is exactly why I want to commit this crime. No, because I like doing it. That's why. I made that a little longer than it needed to be. But I just want you to say it's not, we need to stop doing so much over analyzing when we do not know what's in their head, and half the time they don't either. All right, so now who are let's go to the FBI thing, because I think this is very interesting what the FBI said. So they came out with a profile. Okay. This came from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. A profile of the killer, one that police could pass out to Ling's neighbors to see if it might jog someone's memory. He could have lived, worked, or visited the neighborhood somewhere around or before May 27th. Okay, that is accurate. In other words, he was in the neighborhood on May 27th. He either lived there, worked there, or visited there. There's nothing left. Okay, that's just a statement. Because the offender may have been around for purely legitimate reasons, all right, he may not have stood out in your mind. Okay, I'm okay with that. Legitimate reasons. In other words, he lived there. He's a friend. He's a cousin of so-and-so. Or he's working there and you expect him to be there. He's putting in air conditioning unit or something, Yeah, you don't, it doesn't trigger anything particularly. Like, oh my God, who's that creepy dude? Please keep in mind that the person responsible for Jennifer's death would not necessarily appear strange, threatening, or weird if you would have had some type of interaction with him. Okay, that's fine too. In other words, he doesn't have to look, I mean, if this guy could put horns on this guy, kind of he kind of looks like the devil. So maybe this guy you'd be concerned about. But a lot of times killers are the normal looking people. I mean, I always wonder what people think an abnormal looking person is like. I really don't know. I mean, unless, it's the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, basically we look like humans. Now here's where I start having issues. We believe the offender is a loner. Really? Why? There is nothing in the crime scene that says whether the guy is a loner or he's not a loner. How would you know that from the crime scene? Makes zero sense. Let's take a look at the peeping Tom aspects. There have been peeping Toms who've been married and have children. There are peeping Toms who live alone. What is that? How would you know he's a loner from this crime scene? You don't. And the FBI shouldn't be putting out that garbage because somebody's just guessing that nonsense. And therefore, you know, I don't know. But then, we believe the offender is a loner who may live with others and interact with others. Then he's not that much of a loner. What are you talking about anyway? All right. But he prefers his own company. Again, which you have no freaking clue. I always remember that guy. They said that the Baton Rouge serial killer. They said he was a loner and would live alone and be alone. Turned out he was married and gave barbecues for the neighborhood. So that is not seen in a crime scene. That's just nonsense. He has reasonably good interpersonal skills, which you can have no clue of. He didn't interact with anybody. So how would you know how good his interpersonal skills are? He didn't abduct her. He broke into the house. He didn't even knock on the door and have her open the door to him. How would you know what kind of interpersonal skills he has? You have no clue. He's comfortable in the neighborhood. Well, I don't know how comfortable he was. That's nonsense. Either he lived there, he's visiting there, or he worked there. Comfortable. You don't have to be comfortable to be in the neighborhood. They're saying that, I think, because of the amount of time you spend at the house. But if you're going to say that, and this is what drives me crazy about FBI profiles, every single one of these things they said, they should explain as to why they're saying this. He could have been uncomfortable with the neighborhood, for all we know. But okay, he spent time here. Maybe he had been around the neighborhood before, knew the neighborhood well enough. So, all right. Would not necessarily stand out for any reason. Well, he could. Somebody may have, and actually somebody did notice a man outside this house. I'm going to get to him in a minute. And he stood out to them. So they mentioned it. Why did they mention it? I don't know. Maybe because it happened, they saw the guy around the time of the crime. Or maybe they thought he did look unusual for the neighborhood. Or not. And following the murder, he would have indicated concern or worry about what happened to Jennifer. What? You know how many times I've heard this? After the crime is committed, the guy's going to be spending a lot of time watching television. He might be mentioning the crime. This is nonsense. They have no idea if that guy's going to talk about this or whatever. There are serial killers, for example, who commit a crime and go home to their family and bring pizza and watch a movie. Never talk about that crime ever. There are others who have drinks with some guys and say, hey, did you hear about that girl? Yes, but you don't know. There's nothing in this crime scene that would tell you a dang thing about that. So when he says here, following the murder, it would have indicated concern or worry about what happened to Jennifer. Now, this bothers me for another reason. There's 3 suspects, main suspects. There was a kind of a loser dude in the neighborhood. He wouldn't have cared about Jennifer. There was a next door neighbor who drove Jennifer to school. That's a big suspect in people's minds. He would probably comment, well, we're so worried about what happened to Jennifer. And then the third one was a serial killer who could care less what happened to Jennifer. So my guess is when they did this profile, they were already looking at number 2, and they were painting the profile on this guy, the neighbor. And this is not how you do a profile. That is so egregious that it's totally unacceptable. So you do not paint a profile on somebody because you have a good suspect and you think it's him. And I've seen this done more than once with certain FBI profilers. They already have some inside information. We think this is the guy. And then they do a profile that matches the guy with amazing information in it that you could not have known from the crime scene. So I think they're pointing at the neighbor. It is likely that the person has a problem with alcohol. How would you know the guy's got a problem with alcohol? What does that also have to do with the crime scene? I've known serial killers who they don't touch alcohol at all or drugs. And then there are some who do. And there are some next door neighbors who drink, have a scotch while they're looking over the fence. But then there are those who don't. Where did they get this from? Every profile should be based on crime scene evidence, not something you create in your little mind, profiler, whoever you are. So it is likely the person has a problem with alcohol, but would not normally appear drunk or out of control. Complete nonsense. It is possible he left for a day, perhaps longer, for what would appear to be legitimate reasons. And again, I'm thinking they got their eye on the next door neighbor. Okay. However, if he still has ties to this area, he would have returned. This part about her killer knowing the neighborhood, I personally think is really important. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, this is now going to this is a podcast, so it's now going to more of what the podcast is saying, and I will link that podcast. So the FBI profile is garbage. Sorry, it's garbage. It makes zero sense to me. What do I come up with a profile? I'll tell you what I come up with based on the crime scene. I do believe he's a peeping Tom because he came in through the back. He had to know whether she was going to be there for a long time or not. There were issues about the window coverings and the fact that he was in the house for a long time before he committed the crime. That's very peeping Tom behavior. So I would be looking for a peeping Tom person. Now, that could be any one of these 3 guys because I don't know their habits, the 3 suspects and when they first came up. I would go peeping Tom for that reason. Second thing that really stands out to me is the bondage. To me, that's bondage. It's not just tying up for control. That's bondage. So whoever committed this crime, I would think, would have pornography that is heavily hardcore porn and violent pornography, and bondage pornography, humiliation pornography, torture pornography. It's not Playboy. There are serial killers who only do softcore porn. They like this. They have this thing about pretty girl, a pretty girl they think they can't get, or a pretty girl that they think, oh, you think you're better than me. So they like simple Playboy kind of things. And you go to their house, and that's what they're having them. Those guys tend to be the ones I call fast serial killers, the ones who kill quickly. Oh, jump out of the bushes, hit somebody over the head, and then rape them and maybe strangle them or whatever. And they're done. There's not a lot of prolonged stuff going on where there's torture, the enjoyment of watching them struggle. It's very quick. Now, there's still sadism involved because, doing that to somebody is very sadistic, but it's a different kind of sadism. It's a quick sadism full of rage and power, that power moment. Whereas the slow serial killer likes to get that person in their control. And then they like to do things to them over a period of time that cause them to be terrorized and just suffer. And that's where they get a lot of their thrills from. So the kind of binding of her looks to me as bondage binding. So you get somebody who's in the house watching her. That part is a cheap thrill. Already getting control. She doesn't even know I'm here, but I'm watching her every move. And then finally he pops out and he takes her into the bathroom and then starts controlling her. And he's got now, before the father came home, he had a reasonable amount of time to do this, although there's supposedly no sign of sexual assault. And I will get into that in a bit, where I think it's hard to say. First of all, sexual assault doesn't necessarily require rape. Now, since her knees are bound together, I'm going to say not your normal sexual assault. And she was also had a gag, so that's kind of out too. Anal rape is very possible, and is also very much of a thing for people who are into more torture porn stuff. Also, the guy can simply ejaculate. He can give himself a hand job while he's watching this. This all can excite him, and he can use a rag and not leave DNA, or he can use a condom and not leave DNA, but not actually commit an exact rape. So just because you don't have proof of an exact sexual assault doesn't mean there wasn't sex involved in the crime for the offender. So I believe this is a sexual crime in the sense that part of the makeup of what he was interested in. So that would be my profile. Where he's from. Okay. There was a man who was seen in the front of the house. A description was given of that guy. Now, if he was actually in the front part of the house for any period of time, he's either not the guy, or he is a guy who is confident that nobody's going to identify him. Now, he left out the back of the house. That's for clear. They broke into the back and left out through the back, but it didn't mean he started in the back. So if the person that the person saw, and they heard the glass breaking soon after they saw the person, so it kind of looks like it could be connected. If he was out front, he could not be worried about being seen. But we don't know if that is the guy. I would say he'd have to spend enough time to be aware that nobody else was in the house with her and that she would be alone for a period of time. So yes, would I assume that somehow he saw her prior to this crime and then spied on her? Yes. Now, that could be any kind of loser dude in the neighborhood who has time to watch. It could be a serial killer who's in the neighborhood who has time to watch. It could be the next door neighbor who would definitely know what her schedule was. All right. So that is my profile. Now I'll go to the suspects. All right. I'm just checking on some of your comments before I go to the suspects. Let's see. Well, This is an interesting problem. Hoodies and face masks are acceptable fashion now. This is true, and it's making it much more difficult to catch criminals, especially people who are robbing stores, because you used to not be able to come into a store or bank with a face mask, and now you can, and nobody questions you. And so, really works well. That profiler is a keeper sounds telepathic, and this is the problem. This is not supposed to be psychic stuff. So if you're going to give that information, you want to explain exactly how you came up to each one of those conclusions instead of just making up stuff. And I find out most of that stuff, there was some that made sense, and then there was a whole bunch of stuff that to me either was made up or was matching the suspect that they had in mind, which was the neighbor. Confirmation bias. It's more than confirmation bias. It would be literally painting the crime onto the person. I always go back to this one because it just always drove me nuts. There was, when I was studying all of this, there was a case, and I was reading it in one of John Douglas's books, and he talked about a killer who was on a trail in California, and he said that guy had a speech impediment. And I'm like, why? And he tried to say, well, it's because he didn't abduct the woman. He just jumped out and attacked them. Well, a lot of serial killers jump out and attack women. They don't have speech impediments. They're the fast kind, but they don't have a speech impediment. Some of them speak very nicely. What the heck are you talking about? Where did you get that from the crime scene? And he had a stutter, not even a speech, it has stutter. I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, I'm trying to learn how to profile. I'm thinking, I'm like just sitting there, like my mind has gone blank. I'm thinking, I can't come up with any reason why you would get a stutter out of this. Well, it turned out they had a suspect who had a stutter. Then he put together this profile and made himself look like he was brilliant, like he got inside the mind of the killer and knew he had a stutter. It's nonsense. You cheated. You just cheated. So, yeah. Let's see. Now we're profiling the profiler's motives. Shame on us. Well, you have to profile the profiler's motives. So it's perfectly reasonable. Profile PI's motives. Profile a surgeon's motive. Are they doing it because the evidence supports that they should go this direction, or do they want to make a lot of money, or do they want fame, or do they want a YouTube show that's successful? You know. Sure, you're welcome to do that, and that's also true. Slinging crap around to see what sticks. And then it turns into psychic stuff, where if you say enough stuff and nobody remembers what you said, and later on you come back and say, I said this and it matched, well, then that doesn't work out nicely. I can't remember, but if you're talking about the first scene with the Otero family, that might be BTK, but I don't believe it was Dennis Rader. But you have to watch my whole thing on that. Okay, let's go on. All right, so now, who are the suspects? All right. All right, so the first suspect was a 27-year-old. I'm definitely going to link this. This is from a podcast. I just did some screenshots. That's why I'm not telling you what the name of the podcast is. Let me tell you what the name is, and then I'll link it. It is. What was it? Shoot. I can't find it now. I'll link. I will link it. Okay. 27-year-old Castro Valley resident who police asked us to call Doug. All right. And this is a problem, by the way. When you're giving names to people, one of the things I would like to know is because the Lin family was from Taiwan, and because the guy was outside, and I'll tell you right now, the person who identified him thought he might be a Pacific Islander or an Asian of some sort. Now, this is important because the Lin family was Asian from Taiwan. And I want to know, of these three suspects, the point is who's Asian, who's not. Now, does it necessarily have to do with this crime? In other words, does it have to be an Asian on Asian crime or a white on Asian crime or hate crime. You know what I mean? Or black on Asian. No, it doesn't. But sometimes when you're looking at who blends into a neighborhood or who has certain interests, you might say, I'd like to know. So this guy's named Doug. I don't know if Doug is Asian or he isn't Asian because they're giving him a name, but they're calling him Doug. So he shared a home with his parents in the same neighborhood as Lynn. So that's interesting. So we're talking about somebody who is a relative neighbor. Now, it's not clear who tipped the police off about Doug or what they found suspicious about him, but the more detectives learned about the guy, the more their suspicion grew. They learned that Doug's father owned a surgical instrument sharpening business. So he'd have access to sharp tools. So this supposedly was a sharp tool that had a sharp side on both edges. So not serrated on one side, but just sharp on both. So they're like, oh, he's got surgical tools that they're working on, you know? Though, again, they didn't have the murder weapon at the scene. And they never quite figured out what she was stabbed with, but interesting. So they reached out to Doug's parents to see if they could provide an account of where he was on May 27th. They said they couldn't be much help. It was start of Memorial Day weekend, and they were out of town. All right. So who was there? So they found he had a girlfriend, and they went to Doug, and he said on the day of her murder, on Jenny's murder, he was home all day long until he was picked up by his girlfriend from work. After that, he and his girlfriend went back to his house and hung out. In fact, he said that's all they did the entire weekend. They didn't leave the house really at all. He told the detectives he didn't even know Jenny and didn't hear about her murder until a few days later. But then there was this. The police talked to Doug's girlfriend. They found out her shift on May 27th didn't end until 8 p.m. Oh, more than enough hours after her body was found. So he didn't have an alibi. He did not. So this Doug guy who lives in the neighborhood does not have an alibi. They also learned that not long after Jenny's murder, Doug moved out of his parents' home and in with a friend. But a few weeks later, he moved back in with his parents. Ring a bell? That's exactly in line with the FBI profiler said would happen. That's all nonsense. And people move in and out of houses all the time. It has nothing to do with the crime. It's more a possibility that he's just young or a loser. You know, loser is kind of interesting because, you know, it's like a loser with no alibi. All right. But nothing came of it. They could never link him to the crime, but he was definitely the first one, and his alibi stinks. So there you go. It's like, is he a loser who's like smoking weed and stuff and just doesn't, you know, is just hanging around and is just saying crap, has no interest in this crime at all, and now he's being pointed at, you know, because his parents did surgical tool work, you know. So they didn't come up with anything. It didn't mean he didn't do it. It's just they didn't come up with anything. Although the FBI profile could say, aha, you know, he was in the neighborhood. All that. So let's go to another one. All right. I want to go to the neighbor. That neighbor that a lot of people think was involved. So let's see. Where did it go? All right. Hold on a second. I got to find it. All right. They went back to Doug, by the way. They decided to revisit their first suspect, Doug. And they found that, I say, he agreed to rip some pieces of duct tape to see if he tore the duct tape in the same way. Okay, they compared it. They didn't think the ripping was similar. Okay. Okay, then Doug wanted to get a lawyer. All right, so let's go to the other guy they call Alan. Again, I don't know if Alan is Asian or not Asian. And again, this is just, it may have nothing to do with it, but pointing it out. All right, so what about Alan? There was a tipster that came in, told the Alameda County Sheriff's Officer was a law enforcement impersonator in their midst. He said that a man, who we're going to call Alan, was going around claiming to be a detective with the sheriff's office, flashing a badge and requesting information about certain people. After this complaint, the police located Alan, and as a part of their whole impersonation investigation, they got a warrant to search his car. And in the trunk of his car, they found something that was concerning. What was it? They found a roll of duct tape. Not just any duct tape, the exact brand of duct tape that was used to bind Jenny. Now, this is quite a long time later, by the way. They sent it off to the FBI to be analyzed. They wanted to know more about Alan. Okay, let's see. Who was Alan? He lived in the same neighborhood as the Lynns. He lived with his wife and their children in that home in the neighborhood. And it was the exact same model as the Lynns' home, just in reverse. And a lot of people make this huge thing about, oh my God, he knew the inside of this home. He knew where everything was in it. He knew where the master bedroom was and the upstairs bathroom and so on and so forth. Well, let me say this. So what? I don't understand the big thing about, oh God, he knows the home. I mean, all you do, when you get inside a home, you walk around and you know what's in it. Just because he was in the home doesn't mean he knows anything about the home. I don't understand how that's a big deal. If you're the only one in the home, if you're a killer and you're the only one in the home with the person you're going to kill, doesn't matter whether you run into them in the living room or you run into them in the bedroom. They go upstairs or you hide upstairs and they find, what does it matter? You're home alone with them. That's all that matters. Now, the person who broke in, by the way, supposedly where the window was, actually cleaned up the glass under the window so it wouldn't be noted. So that's why the police believe he was trying to hang in there and not have Jenny notice anything. Oh my God, what happened? He was trying to spy on her. So didn't need to know the home. I think it has absolutely zero to do with the neighbor having a similar style home. So I think it's one of those things, again, you're trying to paint it on somebody. So you say, hey, he's got a similar home. I just don't see how it matters. So anyway, they found this roll of duct tape in his trunk, though, which is interesting. So they got the trunk, and it said here he could actually be the murderer they spent the last 3 years looking for. So 3 years had gone by. They found a roll of duct tape, but not just any duct tape, the exact type. Right. They sent it off to the FBI to be analyzed. So, all right. They also found out that Alan, the fake name Alan, knew Jenny. Why did he know Jenny? She and his daughter went to the same school, and Alan would sometimes drive them both to school. So listen, this is the podcast. So listen, this is one too many coincidences. No, it's not. Living in the same neighborhood with somebody is not that big a coincidence. The fact that his daughters were at the same age, he drove them to school, is not an unusual thing either. I mean, I knew a lot of kids. When my kids were growing up, homeschooled kids, I knew a lot of kids in the neighborhood. And I drove them places. They came to my house. So one of them gets killed, and oh my God, the coincidence is Pat Brown knows them. And they came to her house. Oh my God. And she has duct tape, which I do and still do. Doesn't everybody have duct tape? Yeah, I have a bunch of varieties of duct tape and I'll tell you why. I'm just going to stop here to see how many of you say this too. You buy some duct tape, then you can't find the duct tape. And you're out of the store and you go, do I have any duct tape at home? So you buy another piece of some other duct tape. So one of the things that this Allen guy said was, he said, he uses tape around the house. And it's not uncommon for him to have it in his car or at his house. He doesn't always buy the same brand. He just gets whatever's on sale. What are your thoughts about that? Is that true for you as well? That you, also, you never use up a whole roll. I'm a notorious duct tape buyer. The spice issue. Oh my God. How many times I bought the same stupid spice just to go home and find out it's in my house. You got it right with spice. Absolutely. Well, there we go. I have lots of duct tape, all different colors. Yes. I have blue duct tape, gray duct tape, black duct tape. Yeah. You're hoarding. See, this is what I'm saying. So this guy's like, I'm a homeowner. I have duct tape. Big freaking deal. I live in the neighborhood. My kids know each other. Now, before we get rid of him, though, however, This is what is said about him. Now, all right. However, what about the issue of him impersonating an officer? Police did find an old reserve deputy badge and ID in Allen's car because he was a deputy. Okay. Reserve deputy. Okay. So he had previously been a reserve deputy for the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, the very agency interrogating him. But police couldn't prove that he'd been flashing the badge pretending to still be a deputy. So whether he did or didn't, whether he used it one day because he was trying to get some information, mind you, this again, nothing necessarily to do with this crime. Let's say you were trying to find out something about some neighbor and some guy in your neighborhood who was annoying the crap out of you, and you said, and you just flash it and you go, yeah, you got to do something about that music you got going. You didn't say you were that person, but you flashed the badge. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, can I see somebody doing it? Sure. Does it have anything to do with this homicide? No. He took a stress analyzer test and he passed that. So they didn't come up with anything. Now, some people are saying, oh, he was obsessed with Jenny. Who's saying that crap? She's a pretty girl. Yeah, she's going to school with his daughter. Just, was he friendly to her? What do they mean by he had a thing for her? I don't know where anybody got that from. Could he have been a creepy older dude who liked his teenage daughter's girlfriends? Yeah, it's possible. But I just don't have any proof. Now, what makes me lean away from the neighbor, however, as far as the weirdo dude, the loser dude, I just don't know that there's any connection to him and that specific type of murder. For the neighbor, if the guy involved was in front of the house, I don't believe that would be the neighbor. The last thing he wouldn't want to be seen. So if he only came behind the house to this window, that would make more sense. Would you really kill the girl in your neighborhood that's your daughter's friend? Possibly. I can't take him away as a possible suspect, but I just don't know that there's anything at all linking him. Not a bit of anything. Just because he has a roll of duct tape doesn't make him the killer of Jenny. Just because he knows her doesn't make him a killer. Could he have been obsessed with her and wanted to have that moment with her? Possibly. But what was done to her, to me, was more of a sexual homicide than a stalker type of I just want to be with her for that one moment of my life. I don't know. I can't paint that on him, and I just don't know because I don't have any other evidence that makes me think it's him. What I am concerned about is the bondage element of this crime. And then what looks like somebody's peeping Tom. So those will be, to me, the two things. Yeah, that is true. Oh, duct tape is a new packing tape. Yeah. Maybe the friend of Jenny is being so perfect. Well, the friend of Penn, this crime was not committed by a young girl. I mean, this was a male predator of some sort, either a stalker like a neighbor could be, or a serial killer. This is just, to me, he would be a slow killer. This is not somebody who did everything in 15 minutes. This is a person who stalked, watched, and then started doing the whole slow bondage and torture thing. So not a fast, he's a slow, which makes me think that he's the kind of guy who's obsessed with violent pornography. I don't know what the neighbor had rolling around his house. I would like to know what his pornography is. So anyway, now let me go to the other fellow. Now, one of the things, the other suspect, which kind of made me laugh. So the person who saw somebody lurking outside the house, they said they were Pacific Islander, or some kind of Asian. Okay, so now if they're saying Pacific Islander, you might think of a Samoan, a big, huge Samoan guy. But the guy wasn't that big, but he was pudgy. All right, so they saw an Asian guy. So there was a guy, and his name is Sebastian Shaw. And this is the other suspect, Sebastian Shaw. And when I heard this Sebastian Shaw guy, I'm like, well, first of all, he ain't Asian. Sebastian Shaw, probably not an Asian guy. And so that would take away that sighting. And the other thing I thought was possible was there was a high influx of Asians in this neighborhood. So regardless of what, name that the podcast was told to use, Doug or Alan, I don't, as far as I know, neither one of them were identified as Asian, but was a higher influx of Asians. And now I think they are now, I think there's like 30% Asian in that one area. So, so an Asian in that neighborhood would not be suspicious, is my point. And somebody saw an Asian looking fellow outside the front of the house. So this guy came up, his name was Sebastian Shaw. And I'm like, okay, well, that takes away probably the Asian thing, right? Except then I see this guy, and this is Sebastian Shaw. I'm like, okay, kind of look Asian to me. It's like, so Sebastian Shaw? Okay, the dude's Vietnamese. And apparently he changed his name to Sebastian Shaw. There you go. Had a bad childhood. Things didn't work out well. Changed his name. So, Kurt said Sebastian Shaw done did it. Aisha's heading out. Bye, Aisha. She's in a different time zone. Can you tell if he's a pedo? Okay. First of all, okay, let me explain something here. A pedophile, Jenny was not of the age for a pedophile. A pedophile is way, way younger. A child. She's not a child. She's a teen. And that's an ephebophile. That's a guy who likes teens, not children. There's a big difference. And that's why I keep telling people about Jeffrey Epstein. He was never a pedophile. As far as I know, he was an ephebophile. He just liked them. The young women, youngish women, but when people who were no longer children, but had fresh and lovely bodies and hadn't been used too much, Still on, maybe just hardly off the shelf. Okay, incel maybe has no friends, lives alone. It's possible. Okay, so let me tell you about this guy. Sebastian Shaw was convicted of a double murder in Portland, Oregon in 1992. No, there's no question about this, by the way. He killed Donna Ferguson, 18-year-old Donna Ferguson, 29-year-old Todd Rudiger. They were a couple, and he went into the house and brutally murdered both of them. They'd both been stabbed to death, and they were bound with cords. Now, Donna had been sexually assaulted. And then he was also connected to a 1991 murder of 40-year-old J. Rick Beal, who had also been bound with cords. He got 3 life sentences plus 30 years for 3 murders, sexual assault, and attempted murder. Okay, so the question is, he's from Oregon, and the Lynn family knew nobody in Oregon. And they're like, well, why would this guy have anything to do with this homicide then? And that was my first thought. I'm like, okay, I know serial killers do travel, but hey, really? But he is Asian. So he did fit the description of the guy in front of the house well enough. Okay. So now what turned out, they found him sleeping in a car. All right. Let's see where this is. Hold on a second. Hold on a minute. Okay. Hold on, I got to find it here. Okay, here we go. Okay. Sebastian, where are you, Sebastian? Hold on, I'm just trying to find okay, here we go. So they got this tip in August of 1994. They had a suspicious guy who just come onto their radar. They might want to look into. 600 miles north in Portland, Oregon, they found a man sleeping in a car that had been stolen from San Ramon, California, which was near to the location of Jenny Lynn, within, I think, 10 miles or something, very, very, very nearby, around the time that she was murdered. So he was in the area. There's no proof he was in the exact town, but he was right, and then like the next town over. So he was in the area. And they looked in his trunk, and this is what they found. They found a weight, books on topics ranging from satanic culture to body chemistry to first aid, pornographic material, 2 blue ski masks, plastic flex cuffs, handcuffs, a knife, a claw hammer, binoculars, combat boots, a blue bag, and gray duct tape. The man who had been sleeping in the car was 26-year-old Oregon resident Sebastian Alexander Shaw. They took him into custody and they called authorities in San Ramon to let them know about the stolen car. When they did that, they thought about Jenny Lynn. Now, they also were concerned that duct tape, thing going again. All right. They're trying to figure out any connection to that. All right. Did the duct tape in his car match that duct tape? No, it didn't, because again, we had too many years that passed. So that's not proof. Okay. So they were like, yeah, maybe, but maybe not. But let's go a little further. When the police came back to him again, hold on a second. Let me go back to some more about him, and then I'm going to read you about his crimes, and then you tell me what you think. All right. So going back to that, Sebastian Shaw. All right. So he was found in the stolen car with handcuffs, duct tape, and stuff in his trunk. And he had assaulted also a 22-year-old woman at gunpoint years earlier. And now they got him on, the 1992 double murder in Portland. And so he was in prison now. Okay. They went to question him, but he did not confess to anything. The inmate, one of his inmate buddies, told the investigators Shaw had admitted that he had committed several unsolved murders in several Western states and possibly one on the East Coast. He said he committed 10 other homicides. And then he said he told this inmate he liked to bind his victims with duct tape, likes to sexually assault his victims, likes to steal cars and switch license plate to avoid apprehension. He likes to cut and stab his victims to death. He allegedly told his inmate how he liked to use a knife to cut off the victim's clothes, which is what he did with one of his other victims. So now we got a guy who describes the same kind of crime that Jenny Lynn suffered, the binding with the duct tape, cutting off the clothes with that, and then some sort of sexual assault. So what does all this mean? Is it him? Now, I went back to that book I read, and I wanted to know more about the crimes he actually committed, to know whether I think he matched the style of the crimes or whether it's just, whatever. So let me read you a couple things from that. Sebastian Shaw was super into murder. And one of the things he said was, I've been thinking of murder lately. And then Detective Mike Stallman said this: I was a cop for 30 years, and Shaw left a real impression on me. He had no sense of the suffering and horror he was causing. It was like talking to a reptile. This guy said, Mark McDonald, who was a prosecutor, said, I've never personally had contact with a defendant who was so fixated upon the killing of other human beings. Now, let me tell you what happened to Todd and Donna. Donna was 18, Todd was 29. Now, they were living together, and here is what happened. She was at home. Last time they talked to him was like 4:30 in the afternoon. Sometime just before 5 p.m. on July 17th, a stranger went to see who was there. This was a daytime crime. Full daylight. The young man initially asked about some people he said he knew in the mobile home park, and he wondered if they still lived there. Whether Donna let him in at that point is not known, but what could be pieced together later would have to come from the physical evidence, and a very unusual source, the young man himself. The young man pulled out a pistol and ordered Donna into an adjacent room. Perhaps he did not know Todd was there at the time, but he soon had his pistol pointed at both of them, telling them to be quiet or he would kill them. Thinking they were going to be robbed, both Donna and Todd complied. Because a lot of times you think it's a robbery and thought, okay, so he ties this up, take what you want and get the hell out. The intruder forced Todd and Donna into a back bedroom, and he had Donna tie up Todd's hands and feet with a telephone extension cords. The stranger then shoved Todd into a closet and told him not to make any noise. He pointed the gun at Donna once more, and it became apparent that he was there to do more than rob the place. The intruder forced Donna to lie down on the bed, and he bound her with telephone extension cords, looping them several times around her ankles and arms to make sure she was secure. He took one of her panties and stuffed it in her mouth. He took a large knife and began slicing off items of Donna's clothing until she was completely naked. So now we have the removal of the clothing after the tying up. Sometimes in these cases, they'll take your clothes off and then they rape and tie them up afterwards. This guy tied up people and then cut their clothes off. Donna was gagged, and so was Jenny Lynn. This was a process he seemed to savor, and he cut them shredded clothes and just made them a big heap, and he got off on this. This was a process he seemed to savor, and it made him become erect. When Donna's clothing were finally pushed aside, the stranger mounted her and he began to rape her. He said later she was compliant. She didn't say anything. She didn't fight back. One thing he did not do was cut her with a knife as he raped her, something many sexual sadists do to their victims. Nevertheless, the rape was brutal and persistent, and Todd in the closet, poor Todd in the closet, must have realized something was happening. He struggled to free himself, but also started having an epileptic attack. God, so he thrashed around in the closet, and the intruder went to check on him. At first, the intruder thought he was faking it, but then he could see the distress he was in. The stranger later he said, I could see he was having some kind of medical problem. He's a very caring killer. However, it didn't really. However, it didn't create any sympathy on the part of the intruder. He returned to raping Donna. And there was a horrific conclusion to the rape. From what can be pieced together later, this is what happened. All right, and then what did he do? He then the stranger violently stabbed Donna in the neck as he ejaculated. It wasn't a conventional slashing of the throat. Rather, it was him driving the knife blade clearly through her neck, severing the jugular vein and carotid artery, and actually piercing the spinal cord. She bled out within seconds, a huge pool of blood expanding around her neck and head. After murdering Donna, the stranger turned on Todd, who was still thrashed on the floor, and he just stabbed him in the neck too and killed him. If that wasn't enough, what happened then? So basically he killed both of them. And after that was done, he cleaned himself up, stole a few items from the mobile home, and let himself out. In late afternoon in the summertime, no one saw him. So it's very, very similar. Very similar. Now, a couple more things about this, which I thought were interesting. Where was this other one? Where's that other comment that I found was interesting? Okay, so a little bit about this character. Shaw wrote about going to a university and killing people, and he kept a murder kit in the car he had stolen. He had the anarchist cookbook. Showed he had duct tape, rope, surgical gloves, and he wrote in his journal, "What causes me to have such strange heroes? They're all killers in one form or the other. For these anti-heroes, so full of self-loathing that death becomes nothing, the true reality to them is like dirt under a fingernail." And then he watched some movie and thought it had a great rape scene in it. He says, "This is a very weird subject with me. It turns me on as much as voyeurism." So he was a peeping Tom. He was over at a friend's house who had 3 beautiful daughters. He said it was all I could do to keep myself from raping all 3 of them. McDonald told of pornography found in the car. Comic books about tying up women, forcing them to do oral sex. Then there were chained and bent over for anal sex. There were also tales of women forced to endure torture and branding. It was despicable material. In the hands of Shaw, it was kind of a textbook, Also, he had pictures of books on torturing and raping women and photos of dark-haired women on his walls. It also contained ski masks, duct tape, and rope. And I looked up, because he's from Vietnam, I looked up Vietnamese bondage. And I came up with women with their hands tied behind their backs, their feet tied, and their knees tied. I've got a bunch of those, but I'm not going to put them on YouTube because that would probably be crossing the pornography line. But they were basically bound the same way as Jenny Lind. And in doing so, obviously, vaginal sex is out. And if you gag them, so is oral sex. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do one and then gag them. You know what I'm saying? Or you can do anal sex. And so, therefore, the bindings don't actually work very well for that. One other comment. So, where's this one other comment, which I just made me laugh when I saw it, which is probably somewhat true, and may have something to do with the fact they did not see, maybe didn't see sexual assault. So Henry Lee came in and did some studies. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. I want to point this out. The detectives concluded in the report with many comparisons between Jenny Lind case and those of the other cases. They started out by saying that Shaw, by his own admission, was a serial killer. That is true. He's a serial killer, no question, who may have murdered more than 10 victims. Jenny Lind was murdered on May 27, 1994, and the vehicle was stolen in San Ramon by Shaw, 11.6 miles away from the Lind home shortly after the murder. Coincidence. That is a coincidence. Around the same time, he showed up in Stockton, California at a relative's home, and he spoke of being fired from Guardsmark. He often murdered after being fired from a job. And that is also true for serial killers. When they lose, they have to get their control back. And the murders can happen after they get dumped by a girlfriend or lose a job. Showing photos side by side, the detectives indicated the lower floor windows where an intruder had broken into the Lind screwdriver residence. Let me repeat this. Showing photos side by side, the detectives indicated the lower floor windows where an intruder had broken into the Lind's residence and the Campbell's residence is another one. Oh, okay, wait a minute. Oh, they said there was a screwdriver among the items that were his, okay? And that he used, on both homes, he used that screwdriver as an attempt to get in. Okay, this is from Henry Lee. Knife wounds on Jenny Lind were thought to be from a double-edged knife with no hilt, the same kind of knife recovered in the stolen vehicle. Both the gags on Donna Ferguson and Jenny Lind have been secured in place by bindings. Dr. Henry Lee stated in his report that it appeared Jennifer Lind was sexually assaulted in her anus based on handprints on her buttocks. The report also stated that Amanda Karpova, another one of his victims who lived, said that Shaw's penis was so small she didn't even know she was being penetrated by him. And that's sometimes true. So sometimes a rape is not as horrible as another rape, simply because the guy's small and the other guy was like this. So the damage this guy can do physically and the pain he can cause is way different than this guy over here, who you're like, are you raping me? Just let me know. So he's small. That may have been part of his problems right there. Photos side by side show panties stuck in Donna Ferguson's mouth and secured by a bathrobe sash. And a gag had been stuck in Jenny Lind's mouth and secured by duct tape. Every one of Shaw's victims, except the paraplegic, have been bound. So, Joe, what do you think? Sound like he could be the guy? Micro brain and micro penis makes sense. Hi, Sarah. Sarah just came in here. Has this perversion always existed? Used to be Playboy and Penthouse. What changed? Well, perversion has always existed. You can go back to the Weimar stuff in was it Weimar in Germany? Let's see if I can remember correctly. I have one of the books on that. Some of the most horrific, violent sexual porn you've ever seen, not by photos but by paintings and depictions. It's been around forever. However, as far as what's reached out to the public, it used to be the softcore porn was that. And then over time, more hardcore porn came out in magazines that were bought at that shop at the edge of town called XXX. And you had to go down there to get that. And then you had to pay like $20, I think, a magazine to get that kind of thing. And so you could get hardcore there. Now, if you go online, you can see the most vile, most vicious rape, murder, torture, crime. It's all on the internet now, which is pretty sad. So it's real easy to find now. But there seems to be a lot of it. That's all I can say. I'm not saying that it's just culturally Japanese, because it's in all cultures, but does seem to be a interesting thing there. This is true. Again, each culture has a tendency toward certain kinds of porn, and I'm not going to get into all of them. Doesn't mean the other ones don't do it too, but there are some that are, whoa, that's really big over here, So, yeah. So gosh, very similar is true. Very similar. And I have, if I had to look at the three suspects, the first little loser dude in town, there literally is nothing that I can come up with. The neighbor guy, I can't come up with anything that says he did it at all. I mean, he was in the vicinity thereof, and yes, he knew the girl. But other than that, I just can't come up with anything. This guy does match the crime scene. And with the way I profile that crime scene as a sadistic bondage crime scene, which also had extreme violence with a knife, not just killing somebody, like I'm not saying strangling's nice either, but if you want to be close with a woman and you rape her and then you strangle her while she looks at you, you can say, I was her last lover, that kind of stuff. But this guy, what happened to Jenny Lynn was vicious knife attack, brutal in the neck. She was stabbed also in the abdomen, but she was brutally stabbed in the neck. And that's what he does, along with the bondage. And he was in the area. So, and somebody did see an Asian guy, and it turned out Sebastian is Asian. Just he changed his name to fool us, So I would put him at the top of the list. And what happened was, apparently the Lynns thought it was him too. They absolutely thought it was him. And it's one of the most horrible, sad things that happened was that he wrote. If you watch the Paula Zahn thing, it's just so sad to listen to the parents talk, especially John Lynn, just brokenhearted over this. But he wrote to this character, the Sebastian, in prison. I'm sorry, that's not what I was looking for. Okay, I did finally lose. I finally forgot to put up something. Hold on. I lost it. I did. I finally screwed this up and I forgot to put it up. No. Where'd it go? Hold on. There it is. All right. He wrote to the killer. I mean, the one he suspected to be the killer, this Sebastian fellow. Why did you have to kill her? And he writes this whole very, very long, just sad letter. And the police were backing this, trying to get this guy to confess. And he said this: want to reach for your conscience, your conscience. The guy's a serial killer. Whether he killed your daughter or not, the dude has no conscience. This is always pointless nonsense. And so he got some responses back from the guy, because the guy was just playing him. The guy was probably enjoying himself. Whether he killed Jenny Lynn or not, he was still enjoying this, because you're in prison, you're bored. And if you get some sad old father writing you these pitiful letters, he's probably getting off on it. And replying back, he can also get off on it because he can manipulate. That's what serial killers are about. They will play whatever game they can play. This is what he said. This is some of the things he said. Let me see if I can read some of this to you. First he said, I don't know if you're actually her father or not. But anyway, so then he said, her name is Jennifer. If you still have a conscience to call her by her name, it took a lot of praying to be able to write to you to begin with. I do not feel comfortable at this time to give you my personal phone number or see you face to face, Mr. Shaw. You shouldn't, because he's just going to take advantage of you. I'm a father looking for answers. I believe you have the answers. I've done quite a bit of study on your past crimes with help of the sheriff's detectives. He wants answers, but he wants answers from a guy who could care less about whether he gets them. I'm pretty sure you're responsible for my daughter's death. I know you stole a car in San Ramon, California around the time when my daughter was murdered. Why did you choose this house and area to commit the crime? Then the guy writes back, Dear Mr. Lynn, I am disappointed and you're disappointed at my disbelief. Are you kidding? I'm sorry, but the fact of the matter is anyone can print out any letter on a computer and put a little ink on the bottom and call himself such and such. You haven't convinced me. Now he's trying to claim he doesn't know if the guy's her father or not. Somebody's playing a game. Maybe the police are playing a game, right? Okay. It says, okay, as to the fact you studied my past crimes, none of them did I ever use duct tape. None. Not one. Although that was in my car. No, you didn't put that in there. As for anger and frustration, I have killed. And it's usually something I do at the spur of the moment. It's something that has always been a part of my psyche. It's unhealthy, very destructive, and causes me no end of grief. Ha, ha, ha. Sorry. I'm not believing that. Part of it, I believe, is an anger at that's for another time. As to me having duct tape in my car, I was living out of that car at the time. What person does not have a roll of duct tape in the garage? Well, he's right about that. The killer who slayed Jennifer was an organized killer, something of which I've never been accused of. So now he's like, oh, see, I'm going to go with the FBI. Organized, disorganized. You can see I'm not an organized guy because I was sleeping in the car. Oh, but you were so wait a minute. Sorry. He's disorganized because he's sleeping in a car and he just goes crazy at a certain point in time. And there, when you talk about the crime where he used the cords from the house, he's right about that. He didn't bring those with him. But that doesn't mean he doesn't learn and decide next time he's going to bring his own stuff. So he's trying to call himself a disorganized guy, but he's saying the Jenny Lynn crime was organized, so therefore it couldn't be me. Okay. It's very tragic you lost your daughter at such a young age. I pray that you'll come to peace with it. Modern day shows like CSI and others of its kind make it seem so easy to solve crimes. And the motives of the killers so clear. He's right about that. See, serial killers are not that stupid as far as they understand what people think. They know what's out there. Sometimes things happen with such weird coincidence that makes it easy to come to a conclusion, albeit a wrong one. If I wronged you, then I would ask for forgiveness. Oh, hell, you would not, you lying piece of... But I don't have a need to ask Mr. Lynn for his forgiveness because I've never wronged him. So there it is. Give up your quest for vengeance. Believe me when I say revenge doesn't give much satisfaction. Good Lord. And then he writes back, I'll keep you in my prayers. And he didn't get any answers because if he didn't do it, he's just answering back and amusing himself. If he did do it, he's just answering back and amusing himself. You're never going to learn anything from them. The only way you would ever get anywhere doing this kind of thing is if you can trick them into giving up information that they think you know, but you actually didn't. And if you could do that in such a way that then you knew they did it, that would be good information. But in this case, there's nothing here that's going on besides begging. Begging doesn't work with psychopaths. It makes no sense whatsoever. So you have to be very clever to try to trick them into screwing up and giving a piece of information they think is not going to help you because either you already know it or they think it's meaningless or whatever the reason is. But you have to be good at tricking them. Otherwise, yeah, you're just going to have a wasted conversation that he's getting off on. But poor Mr. Lynn is just being played like a fiddle, as they say, or like a viola, which his poor daughter did play. And yeah, so very, very sad. And I don't think then, by the way, this Sebastian Shaw has died, so he's not around anymore. So this is going to, if it's not Sebastian Shaw, if it's somebody else, there's a possibility this case can be solved. But the chances of that are very limited. Now, let's say it turns out to be the neighbor. Well, then, if he's still alive somewhere along the way, I guess it's possible. Maybe DNA can be pulled eventually. 1994, they could have some DNA, but they're not saying they have any. So if they don't have that, they'd have to go with a confession, and that's unlikely. So either the guy who did it is dead, or they're just waiting on a miracle. But I don't think this case is going to be solved. But I think that Shaw, to me, is the only one that makes a lot of sense that he did it, because I think this is a sexual homicide and not a love-struck stalker type of homicide. I mean, sometimes stalkers do kill because they are obsessed and they want that moment in the sun with that person. Just up in New York. And why did that guy shoot John Lennon? Because he wanted to be the guy that shot John Lennon, because their names will be linked forever. And so sometimes you'll have that kind of thing. But the whole bondage thing, not just tying her up, but bondage. So again, if it had been just a real quick tie up of her hands and legs to keep her from, hands and feet to keep her from moving, I get that. The extra stuff on her knees and the tightness of it and the huge amount of duct tape that was used, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like sexual bondage to me. I'm not saying the neighbor couldn't have been into that, but I just see, at this point, I see absolutely nothing that links him to the crime outside of he happened to be a neighbor who knew the girl. I mean, that doesn't make you a killer. So and apparently the police didn't really think so either. So, yeah, they're still alive. Boy, poor people. It's just horrifying. Let's see what else you have to say here. Hope they get some justice. Well, probably not. I mean, justice may come in the afterlife. That's all I can ever say to some families who lose somebody like that. Life is not fair, and some of the horrible people that live on this earth don't care about being fair, and tragedy does happen. So, horrible accidents happen that seem very unjust. Just something crazy that, a tree limb falls on your head and kills you, and you didn't do anything wrong. You're just standing there and the tree limb fell off. And is that right? People die of all kinds of horrible diseases, and that doesn't seem very just. So my belief is life is an adventure, but, because you roll the dice while you're here and you're not being controlled every minute of your life, anything can happen. And because other people aren't controlled, anything can happen as well. So life is an adventure. You just hope it doesn't end up horribly tragic, as in this case, which not only did she lose her life, but they probably pretty much lost theirs in the process as well. And if there's justice, hopefully it happens at some point in the future, though. Yeah, that's true. Life isn't fair, and then you die. I mean, that's a that's a pretty much that. What's the original saying on that? Life is brutal and short, something to that effect. It's the way it is. Beth Holloway got complete. Oh yeah, Jorn van der Sloot, who clearly killed Beth Holloway's daughter Natalie, in Aruba. He blackmailed her, saying he would tell her where her daughter's body was, and then Beth Holloway fell for it because she was desperate, and all he was doing was playing with her. He was playing with her. The neighbor gave a false. Oh, sorry. You said that the neighbor gave a false alibi. I did not see that anyplace. I don't know. I didn't see that. I don't know where. Was that in a police report? I don't know. I've watched a bunch of stuff and read the book, and I haven't seen anything about him giving a false alibi. I could have just missed it, mind you. Yeah, he's dead. Shaw is dead in prison. Yes. What? Oh my God. Lisa says, Pat, I posted in the Patreon chat that a guy was struck by lightning and killed after going back to warn kids of an impending hurricane on the way to his car. Now, do a good deed. It's unbelievable sometimes. Oh my gosh. How do you move on? They started a Jenny Lynn Foundation. Mark Class helped them with that. That's the best. They do a thing where they're supporting kids in music, and there's every year they do an orchestra thing, and hope that they're helping other children to love music and whatever is something. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you go on very well. I don't. I mean, some people know how to say to themselves that I had this much time with the person I loved, and I'll see them again someday. And therefore, I will cherish that time, but I will live well now with my other kids and other people helping the community. And there are people who really, truly manage to do that. And I hope that if anything ever happens to my life like that, that I would have that attitude. I don't know that I would, but I can wish I had that. It would be nice because I think that's a brilliant way to think. Because if you go through life saying to yourself, life is unpredictable, and just because I have a child doesn't mean the child will survive. As long people I say, oh, children, child shouldn't die before their parents. Well, that's because we don't want to suffer thinking our child died younger and didn't get a chance to finish out a full life. And also, we don't want to have to deal with that. But the fact is, when we have children, we don't know how long they're going to be on this earth. We don't know how long our friends are going to be on this earth, and we don't know how long we're going to be on this earth. So anything can happen, and it can happen in an instant. I'm here today. I just celebrated my 69th birthday. I could get bad news tomorrow. I could get terrible, terrible news tomorrow. I'm like, oh, well, crap. That's why I had this problem or whatever. I could get hit by a car. Thinking that, oh, good, I'm in pretty good health. I might make it another 10 or 20 years. Oh, never mind. And my 3 children are on this planet as of this moment, and so is my granddaughter. But that doesn't mean they're going to. I don't control that. I can't say that in the next 10 years I'm not going to lose somebody I love dearly. I can't. I just hope that maybe I could have a good attitude, like some people do, somehow accepting and continuing to do something good and continue to see beauty in life in spite of the fact that we also suffered that pain. But I have no idea. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, we just don't know. And until you're in that place, you don't actually understand how you would deal with it. I grew up in a house, for example, that my parents died in their 90s, married over 50 years. My aunt and uncle died in their late 80s, married over 50 years. I never knew anybody who was divorced. I believe my sister did get divorced before me, but when I got divorced after 25 years, that didn't compute for me because, in my opinion, my parents had always been married, so I figured I would always be married until one of us died. But life had something different going on, and I had to experience that. And I took it badly, mind you. I took it badly because I just couldn't realize it, understand it, and accept that things had changed that dramatically. And eventually I learned to accept it, and eventually I made good with my life as best I could. Do I still have some regrets over the divorce and what it did to my family? Yes, I do. But things happen in life, and you cannot fix those things. Sometimes it's just the way it is, and then you have to go on, and then you find out that, well, some things didn't turn out well, but then again, sometimes you get, like, my career blossomed because I didn't have to worry about him anymore. I could travel wherever I wanted to, and I've never remarried, maybe because I like being free. So yes, did I gain something from it? Yes, I did, because other things opened up, other doors opened up because I wasn't married. I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to be in a good marriage and continue having our family together. Absolutely, I would choose that probably over this, but this is here. So this is what happens even when people lose a loved one, that sometimes in their name they do things that do tremendous good in the world. John Walsh, after he lost Adam, he, this whole America's Most Wanted and everything else that came after that, did a great deal of good for bringing in criminals. Would he rather have Adam back? Probably. But, I would say absolutely. He could say, screw America's Most Wanted, I want my kid back. But his kid can't come back. So he did something else with his life. Give him credit on that. So, and that is true. It is. Yep. Glad for your children you didn't remarry. Well, I want to make sure I didn't marry a jerk. I was, my kids were already grown up, by the way. So, and it wasn't like I'd had, bringing somebody into the house when my kids were underage. I never believed in that because I think that could be a disaster. But even afterwards, sometimes it's difficult for children to have their parents remarry, and sometimes it works out well because they like the person the parent remarried, and sometimes it doesn't work out well and can be just a nightmare. But again, that's part of life. And I just saw The Lion King. Wasn't that a whole theme? Yeah. Oh my God. Some nice thoughts here, but at any rate, it's been rough for them, and it shows in the documentary. So very sad. And I say this one hit me because she just seemed like such an absolutely lovely girl. And then just again, it's not that you think other kids should deserve to die. Oh, then that's not as important. That kid was kind of a mess. So too bad. It's not like that. It's just that when you see more purity, when you see somebody who you think, my gosh, such a person who should never have been a victim in any way. No drugs, no drinking, no bad behaviors, no running away from home, no involvement in anything that was terrible. A girl who did the right things and home practicing or playing piano duets when this creep showed up, whoever the creep was. Just, one of those things. What about The Lion King? I've always wanted to see it. The puppetry was really cool. I personally, it wasn't probably my favorite show ever. I thought the story was kind of lame. I know what the real story is, but I think when it came out on stage, it just didn't quite hold what it should hold. I thought a couple of the actors were fabulous. I thought one was a little weak. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not a kid either, So and the musical's been around for years. It's a little bit dated, but I'm glad I got to see it. I am, but it probably wasn't one of my favorites. Let me say that. So, anyway, but. Yeah, that's pretty much. I'll end the show on this. It was very unfair and tragic. Poor girl, infuriating too. It is. It's terrible, terrible. But anyway, that's this show tonight. And I'll see you for the hangout, which will probably be. I think it's the 3:00 in the afternoon hangout EST. So you folks in the UK can make it, in Europe, and. Then I'll be planning toward next weekend and figuring out what I'm going to be doing. So anyway, thank you all for being here. And now I'm going to go crash because I've had 4 days of running around and my feet really hurt because I had to go up down a lot of stairs in the subway. So I was like, oh no, more up something. No, I got to go up again. I was like, So thank you all for being here. And I'm happy. I really enjoyed myself. Happy to be home at the moment. And I'm just going to lay down. See you soon. Bye.